So it looks like we've got a full house. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, joining. So I will, at 6:32, call to order a meeting of the Wenham Finance Committee, Wednesday, January 31st. Thank you all for being able to join us this evening. Uh, I had sent out an agenda, not real specific. I was viewing as our opportunity, given all the work we've been doing over the past several weeks, to regroup, discuss where we are at individually, uh, have another, we'll call it provisional vote, and you know, maybe to be as direct as possible. Yeah, say this is really kind of the last opportunity to voice some objection before next week, which, when we meet, is the day after the select board will have met to vote on the budget and the capital plan. And we will do the same as a final vote, which is what will be our recommendation individually and as a committee in the warrant book. And it's also, since we do have a little bit of time, if there are some areas that giving some members some heartburn for us to voice those and yeah, see about affecting some change. But I thought that a good way to start off, other than that preamble, a good way to kind of kick off the discussion is a review of the information that Jeff Soulard had prepared for the quintuple board meeting last night, which has been updated with some new information, which became available late yesterday and didn't necessarily make it into the presentation, or became available today, in that it is a high-level view of both revenue and expenses, and also the capital spending proposal coming from the town administrator's office is a good way to starting our discussion. That sounds good with you, Jeff.
Yeah.
I'll pass it to you, and maybe you can share that file.
Yeah. So let me
Unless anyone has other thoughts, but that's how I thought we might kick off.
so we had prepared a presentation last night for the school meeting, and there was one late change to that budget heading into yesterday, which was that I had reached out to the folks at Essex North Shore Tech when we got word that we had 5 additional students in the system over there. We knew we would be seeing an increase, and so that did actually pan out, that we were looking at probably a $100,000 increase to that budget, which is roughly $20,000 a student. So obviously that was sort of some negative news yesterday. Not much we can do about it, and I tend to be a big advocate for the tech, and I'm happy to see kids taking advantage of it. It's a great program, and obviously offers the kids in Wenham a different career path, which I think is fantastic. So we added that
Anyone
yesterday.
has tried to hire a contractor, I think, yeah, sees the need, right? Plumbers,
Exactly.
electricians, carpenters. We need some more of those for sure.
Indeed.
Nice if we can get them back into town to provide services here. And that'd be awesome if we sponsor them to go into Essex Tech.
Yeah, sort of like, if they, because we sent them, we get to, they have to come and be a
At
contractor
first, at
for
first shot.
years.
Wishful
Uh,
thinking.
so that was sort of negative news yesterday, was that, we saw like $100,000 bump in the budget. Um, but then today, we went and, we were able to confirm that the pension payment that we have to pay to Essex County, regional retirement is actually going to be much lower than the 10.3, high water estimate we were using. And it looks like it's actually only going to be, a little, under 2% increase for the year over what we had for in the budget last year. So that's a
And
huge savings for us right there. And it's sort of
I'm sorry, Jeff, is that based on actuarial tables?
exactly. So, we're in there with, roughly speaking, I'm looking at the document here. There's probably, 20 to 30 participants in the Essex Regional Retirement System. Essentially, the way it works is cities tend to have their own retirement systems. So Gloucester, Beverly will have their own systems, but Essex and Wenham and Hamilton tend to participate in a regional system. And so, yes, they do. We provide payroll information and things like that. Each community in the district provides all that, and each year they crunch out actuarial statistics that get vetted through auditors and actuaries, and then also through an organization called PARAC, which is kind of the state level pension organization. And then they return to each member in the unit, what their upcoming charge is going to be for the coming year. And so I think this year, maybe relative to other participants in the system, we have added less headcount and things like that. So we're able to have a smaller share of the overall payment due this year to stay on track for, I think it's a 2033 is what we're targeting to be fully funded. Was kind of the mandate that the pension board took on. So we have all been budgeting these really large increases, but for us this year, it looks like we've got a little bit of a breather here. So that provided us, roughly $88,000 of saving, I believe it was. So that kind of nullified yesterday's news from the tech that added about $100,000. Actually, the tech was about 93,000 more than we were expecting, and the regional retirement was about 88,000 less. So, pretty much within 5,000 of offsetting each other.
Nice.
And then on the screen, which I think you can see, is the screen still sharing here with the
Yes.
Okay. So I highlighted the sort of the three things that were different in the last couple of days. The final one that's on the top here is that we had been carrying underneath the town hall budget, we had been carrying a reserve for salaries of $20,000 for pending contracts and things like that. Not the big contracts like, the police or the DPW unions, but individual contracts like, the police chief or the deputy police chief, the deputy and chief in the fire department. I have a contract. Steve has a contract. Mine's not up. I don't think Steve's is up. But we have to have some money available for those contract negotiations as well. So in talking to Steve today, he thought we should probably add a little buffer to that just to be safe based on the folks he's talking to and the contract talks he's having. So that ended up being another like 12,000 we added. But net at the end of the day, we're still coming in. We're about $90,000 under the levy limit we're allowed to raise as of this budget right now.
And Jeff, quick question: is that reserve or the incremental reserve to account for contracts that will be sort of negotiated between now and June or whenever we get the budget?
Yeah. So like I think I don't want to like name anybody specifically or whatever, but there are contracts out there that, yeah, they would be July 1. They're being negotiated now and they would be July 1 implementation.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So other than that, this is, pretty similar to what you saw last night. The next page is just, oops, that was actually, I'll go skip back. So this is just, I don't know if it's worthwhile, Jeff, if you feel like doing another quick run through just how the sort of the revenue side of the equation works, or if we feel like people have a fairly good understanding of that.
Maybe just make room for questions since we went through it last night.
Sure.
Is that fair?
Yeah.
Or I'm just thinking we just went through it last night. It's pretty fresh.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, that's, so basically, this page here, what we're allowed to raise, essentially is 24,582,000. And that is the levy limit. It's excluded debt reduced by any of our local receipts, state aid. And then, we have some other debt service funding, which, just so folks know, there's some debt on this building that the CPA had agreed to pay for several years ago. And so that's about $109,000 worth of debt that doesn't get borne directly through taxes. It's still borne by taxpayers because they pay the CPA surtax. But some of those funds go to offset town debt in the form of $109,000. And then there's an additional $12,000 in change, which are betterments. I know we did some big road improvements in a section of town, Longfellow, I think, that some of those residents are paying a betterment for the improvements to the road around their houses. And so that is revenue that comes in. That's directly not tax revenue that is borne by those specific property holders. So looking at this page, we've got about 24,582 to spend. And if we roll
Hey,
here.
Sorry, Jeff, could I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
And probably because I wasn't there last night, but of that 3.25% increase, is
Yeah.
that 2.5% plus the tax levy related to the improvements, the
Exactly.
reassessments on it? Okay.
Yeah. So the levy limit, according to the DOR last year, was 20,121,708. So we get to take 2.5% on top of that is what the town is allowed to grow. So that's about $503,000. On top of that, there was an assumption built into this for what we call new growth. So new growth is new homes, improvements to homes, whatever that is certified each year.
Got it. Yep, that's what I thought. Okay.
That continues to be a conservative conservative estimate, correct, as to what new growth will be?
I mean, I think if you were to look at our last 3, 5, 7 years, it's probably conservative. But I think the feeling here is that because the assessors have been sort of more active in the last few years, they've done a fairly good job at collecting quite a bit of these projects that maybe hadn't been captured over the years. So the new growth numbers have probably been a little bit higher the last few years. So I think we have kept a lower $150,000 in there with the thought that at some point this will level off a little bit, and because we've captured a lot of the sort of previously uncaptured stuff, and we should be getting to a point where all that we have now is just legitimately new projects that are cropping up now, and not the last 2, 3, 4 years.
But better to err somewhat conservative on the new growth estimate. You want to be as accurate as possible, but if you're going to be over or under, you want to be under.
Right. And honestly, so say new growth really comes in at 240 or something like that, all it will serve to do is actually really kind of it will sort of shake out at when we set the tax rate. It's always better to be conservative. We had a year in Essex where we weren't conservative enough, and we actually came in short. I mean, like, to the extent of, like, we used an estimate of like 80,000 and it came in at like 15,000. And we actually had to have an additional town meeting to set the tax rate. So yeah, I think this is probably the prudent course of action, but my hope would be, last year, this year, and next year, maybe we'll start to develop a more refined, new growth estimate that's maybe a little bit more in line.
You have mentioned that you're working on a schedule that will identify for us just what borrowings, projects, expenditures account for debt service, excluded debt, and debt service underfunding.
And I did finish that today in a way that I needed to use for something else I'm working on, but I have all the data now and I can, throw it into something a little prettier over the next few days. But we have that all pretty much locked down now.
Nice. Yeah, I think that'd be interesting for us all just to see what that is.
Yeah, all things considered, it's not, I mean, other than with the addition of the fields this year, the town is not currently carrying a large amount of debt. I mean, that's obviously, if you look at the projections, going to change in the near term, but for right now, other than the fields, it's not too high.
Sure.
So again, just under 24.6, million is what we potentially have as revenue streams. And if we look here, we're at, 24,490, 273 is what our operating budget. This is separate from capital. Capital is assumed to be handled by free cash. So that won't actually impact the levy limit or anything like that. So when you shake those two things out, the 24.6 less the, just under 24.5, we're looking at expenditures being about 92,000 under, the levy limit itself. So, to some degree, hopefully for some people, the fact that we're not just saying, well, geez, we can go right up to 24.582. Let's do that. We are, saying, let's set expenses at a reasonable amount. And if there's cushion, we're not just going to tax to the levy limit just for the sake of taxing to the levy limit.
What's the difference? I appreciate the gesture, but it's 24,490 versus 24,582, right? So 92,000 ish.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying we're moving heaven and earth here, but
it's not nothing. But it's I just wanted to do the math.
Yeah, I think about 92,000.
Yeah, I mean, so
I got it, and I just a principle. I guess I just want to. I've said it before a little bit, but I just don't like the way we talk. I don't like the way we do free cash. It just feels like it hides what's a real expense. It's something you just said, Jeff, about how free cash funds CapEx, and maybe that's standard and how it's done. But I just think about, if I'm a citizen, essentially we're saying to the citizens, we're taxing you this much money. We're spending it on this stuff. It's that simple. When we talk about free cash, it's like, even the name, we should just change the name. Somehow we need to, it creates this mindset of like, it's extra money that was laying around from previous years. And so we're going to invest it in good. I'm not even questioning how we spend it. It's more just like, I think one of our mantras on the committee has been, let's be as transparent as we can. Let's have good metrics and KPIs. And then we can make informed decisions. Everybody can make informed decisions. This, like I said, beating a dead horse, but it just feels like the way we think about free cash doesn't enable that. It's contrary to that. Like, we should be really clear with, hey, taxpayers, this is your money from previous years, and we're spending on capital this year. It's just,
yeah,
it's not free cash.
Good point.
No,
I've
and
heard
I
it
will say
described.
nobody likes that name, because it's, I think I would say that frequently when I was on the finance committee. Like, it's, it's not free. I mean, it's already, it's pre-taxed, and it's prepaid tax money, and we either received more revenue or we spent less than we thought we would.
Let's just call, can we, on our presentations and stuff, can we call it that? Just call it prepaid taxes.
I mean, we could. I mean, it's, I mean, the legal name of it is free cash, but I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess I could check with,
I mean, I'd love to show that to the town that way. Show it to the town as prepaid taxes. Because it even feels worse, right? Now it feels a little bit, now I feel a little bit more cautious. If I call it prepaid taxes, then dang, I sure better justify how I spend it.
Is it prepaid or already? It's like, it's pre-collected. It's like, we didn't, Wenham didn't pay it, right? Wenham's
yeah,
pre-collected. It's like,
well, it's prepaid by the resident, pre-collected by the town.
It's unspent prior year taxes.
Even that, yeah, just call it unspent prior year taxes, something like that.
It's more descriptive, certainly. It's way more accurate.
What you could do is you could, if you've
and
got to
more
use the
descriptive.
name, you know, free cash, you could use that from a comparison to what other towns do, but footnote the term where you use it so you can set a definition. So you could distill that for the
A clear
taxpayer easily.
definition.
Yeah.
And
That
even
might make
saying, yeah,
sense.
even saying it's common to use, it's common to carry a level of free cash. It's common to use it for CapEx. We're following best practices, but
This is what it really is. Yeah,
yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, as we can get, as we get closer to the presentation. Yeah, I'm not, I don't have an objection to the term, I guess, because that is what is widely used, but totally in favor of a very clear layman's explanation for what it is, and even disclaimer to point out there's nothing free about it. This is your money. It was taxed the prior year, collected the prior year, and wasn't spent last year. It was something plain and simple,
It's really a
understandable.
budget. It's a budget surplus, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's
it's a
really
good
what it
point,
is.
Dano. Let's
Yeah.
continue that theme of being transparent and providing the information in a way that is as digestible by folks as possible.
Okay.
thanks for entertaining my soapbox. Carry on.
Yeah, no, we'll work it in to the presentation.
I mean, I think that, Jeff, that's really, I mean, as Dano said, we kind of talked about a lot of this last night. So this, that's a quick high level look at it with the, the addition of, the school and the saving on the retirement. So yeah, I think, any other questions or if people want to dive back into specific budgets.
I think, can you just show us some words? What's the best way to see the total labor increase versus everything else increase, Jeff?
Here you go. So, which one is this? Lost sight. Has anything come up for you guys?
Yeah, we
Yes.
see the spreadsheet.
Okay, so this is isolated just wages. So each department broken down to wages. And so there's kind of a lot of detail here. I mean, each department.
But yeah, go to the very bottom. What's the total on wages?
Yeah, and so
wages go from 4.9 to 5.2. So $279,000 of our increase is wages.
yeah, where am I? This doesn't. I feel like there should be another line down here. Because this is just water. General. Okay, yeah. So yeah, so there, and this is including the water department, which is fee driven rather than tax driven. But yeah, as you say, 279.
Excluding schools, right?
Yes, and but we don't actually have a breakdown on like the school.
No,
breakdown.
that's good. That's fine. I just wanted to confirm that's excluding.
Yeah,
schools.
actually, you know what? I think I pulled. Yeah, just this. Yeah, so I pulled the schools out of that. I just want to make sure I did. So yeah, so that's I think that's the general fund total there.
So out of the, I'm just going back to the PDF you had. Out of the $1.3 million increase, 879,000 of it is schools.
Schools or other,
239,000 is labor, or whatever that number was. 279 is labor. The remainder isn't that much, probably.
Which kind of stands to reason, right? Because for the most
Yeah.
part, anything that wasn't like a contractual expense increase was level funded. So the lion's share of that, like you say, whatever it works out to be.
Well, I was just, what was the number on your spreadsheet?
It's you know, that the number on the spreadsheet for this expense change was 1.35 million.
No,
So,
yeah, I mean, on the spreadsheet you were just showing us on the wages. Yeah, it's 289.
yeah, so the delta is the million six. There is the non labor
Okay, and then
increase.
take out schools. Schools is 879, 578.
Yeah, so 183 would be your, you know, your non-school increases,
Of which
and of
are
which
benefits included in your
125,000 was,
labor?
what's
Or
that?
benefits are included in your labor number?
No, benefits are an expense. So I was just going to say, of that 183, like 125 of that is benefits.
Right. So yeah, let's take that out. 125, 320.
Yeah, so
And
that's kind
of that, of that, it's OPEB and insurance.
yeah.
So
Yeah, so actual expenditures are a fairly low, you know, part of it when when you look at it.
I know, I mean, I know we all know that. I just thought since
No,
we're
it's
talking
interesting
about
to walk through it.
the overall budget tonight, and Jeff's got us an agenda item to kind of approve things in spirit or in general. That just helps level
Yeah,
set.
it's a good way of framing it. So you have labor, which is determined by contractual obligations and pretty much baked in. You have the schools. Um, yeah, not a lot of discretionary spending here.
I mean, it's back around to where we started in an earlier meeting. Like, the only way for us to really move the needle is if we can somehow get engaged around the labor costs.
Yep.
Which I don't know how you do that, or it feels like this big black box.
Yes, I think the good news, of course, is that all of the departments and the committees that spend money got the message. You're not going to get any more than you got last year. You've got to hold the line, except to the extent that they've negotiated higher wages through their labor contracts. But yes, regionalization, combining services with other communities, at the end of the day, seems to be the way to go. To simply eliminate service within town without replacing be rather significant challenge. So
I think
yeah,
it'd be super helpful, Jeff, Soulard, and or to Steve, to help educate us more on the contract negotiation side of things, the structure, the levers, where just it'd be good for us as finance committee members. I'd like to understand it because it's the biggest part of what we do, and I don't have a clue.
Yeah, and I mean, quite honestly, it is fairly locked down in most places. I mean, it's, you know, even as town accountant in Essex, I wasn't heavily involved in the negotiation side. It was really Labor Council and typically Board of Selectmen and or Select Board and a town administrator. I know that they do have, you know, some towns add, you know, one finance committee person to actually like sit in and you know, have a voice in those negotiations, because it is you know, as you say, it's you know, we're seeing it right here. It's a big part of what we do. And you know, unfortunately, if you're on the finance committee, it is kind of, you know, it is handed to you as a done deal. And so, you know, I think it could go two ways. I mean, you know, having a finance person involved, you know, might help, you know, maybe obtain a better result for the town, or would certainly help provide a better understanding of how it operates. I can, talk to Steve about the best way to approach that. I mean, I know we're in some, that some negotiations have started. And, even allowing an extra person in can be sometimes something you have to negotiate. But yeah, I mean, I've kind of mentioned it to Steve the other day, and we can kind of look into it more on what we can do to provide the FinCom, either as a unit or individually, a better understanding of each, of the major contracts, and then the other ones that are individual, are a little different because they're not, if I have to negotiate my contract, I don't have the power of the police union or whatever behind me. It's just me and the select board negotiating. Those tend to be a little easier to handle. But that being said, and I think Eric talked a little bit about this last night. I mean, it's a difficult time for negotiations right now. I mean, it's just the environment is not great, and we're seeing it obviously in Newton right now. We've seen it in Andover, and Haverhill and Woburn and whatever. And each one of those towns that even though it's school related, each one of them that sort of sets a new benchmark. That impacts our upcoming teacher negotiations, and it trickles down to fire and police as well.
I get it. It's just, yeah, it's so the education helps. I think back to the point of everybody being smarter about this biggest, like the entirety of our budget. Basically, I feel irresponsible being on the finance committee and not having a clue. And then for 10 years, kind of hearing as a town citizen, it's a foregone conclusion, labor is what it is. That doesn't feel right or true. I mean, everywhere in the world, labor isn't what it is. It's what it ends up being. Like, it's what gets negotiated. And so anyway, I think we should stop just kind of talking about it like it is what it is. It can't be because it doesn't work.
Yeah, the other thing I would say too is however we want to communicate it this year, I think that bridge basically shows that the fixed versus variable is not there isn't a lot of, variability in what we can control on the expense side with that much representing contractual obligations, right? So I don't know how we explain that or, how we want to do that, but I think it's important. I'd want to know as a taxpayer that the view is, hey, taxes are going up and there's all this sort of variability in the budget. And the reality is, and we've seen the sort of the revenue side is constrained, but the expense side, this expenditure side you can pull in, but when this much of it is personnel expense, it doesn't, where the committees and the people who are sort of advising here don't have a lot of control over it just because of the nature of these contracts and union labor and all that good stuff. I think it's important that the town understands when their taxes are going up that it's not, there's not as much discretion as they would think,
But I think for our benefit, a good point, to David and Dano, just the benchmark. It is a black box to us. It is presented. It's done, and it's going to be negotiated. And here it is. It's done. But
well, it's a
getting
little bit of an operating leverage issue, right? I'm sure Danvers has their constraints too, but being a materially larger pie probably, gives you a little operating leverage over your expense lever versus the fixed cost to deliver services to a 2,500 resident town. It just kind of, it's a scale issue, right?
Yeah, and I think it would be interesting for us to understand, what are the benchmarks being used on the union side of the negotiations that support increases, particularly when they exceed, as was referenced last meeting, what the CPI increase or the Social Security increase is that folks on fixed income are going to get, and how and why was that persuasive for the town to sign on to those sort of increases? And it would
Yeah,
be
and
helpful to
To
understand it.
Dano's point, I had my share in corporate of dealing with companies across the table that had union contracts, but I can't say from a municipal standpoint, I really understand that at all.
Yeah, and the thing is within a municipality too, like not all union contracts are the same. So,
Right.
the the police and the fire department have much more clout than other unions. So you have to approach those
Sure.
negotiations different than you approach the DPW negotiations,
Right.
and things like that. I know they did a comprehensive study over the last few years that benchmarked us against, I think, 7 other communities, and the target of this survey was to put us in the 75th percentile of what was deemed our peer group by this consultant, and
Yeah.
that is supposed to be kind of the core of what drives, whether it's the assistant in my office or a contract person like me, or people that are under contracts with the police or the fire or the DPW or things like that. It's all supposed to sort of be bound by by that as our guiding principle, which is
But how many of our peers are 3,900 person towns?
well, that's the thing, is it was designed to be, we weren't comparing ourselves to 25,000 person towns, or we were, or frankly,
even the surrounding towns, like we're one of the smaller ones, I think.
yeah, I mean, you're sort of right between Essex and Manchester size wise. I think you're, again, the Gordon College, kind of like, you're a little closer to Essex without it. You're a little closer to Manchester with it. But yeah, I mean, it's really very much the same challenge we had in Essex. I mean, it's, we're 1,000 people smaller than Wenham. So it's, who are our peers? Like for us, it was Nahan, which is, a peer on a lot of levels, but they have very different geographic challenges than we do or whatever. So I think it's certainly hard to find, whether it's Wenham or Essex, it's tough to find a whole lot of really good comps. And honestly, like size wise, a lot of times the comps, I know certainly for Essex, were a lot of Western Mass towns that are operated very, very different than the towns on the coast, north of Boston. There's just a different approach to local police. You have
It's a one horse town with minimal infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, literally in the western part of the state, I mean, it's not uncommon to share a treasurer or share an accountant, or because the
2
the
police
population
officers
is
Yeah.
low, and I mean, I think some of them at some point, I mean, it's almost like the state police kind of swing through, or whatever. So it's a very different way that they do things out there, which isn't necessarily right or wrong, but I don't know,
It's not comparable to us. Yeah.
no, it wouldn't really fly. So yeah, I mean, I think the comps aren't probably perfect, but this consultant was able to find the ones that they thought made the most sense in terms of a comp. But at the same time, it's I think when you look at things like whether it's our police or the school or whatever, the reality is you're still competing for a police officer with Hamilton and Beverly and Manchester and Ipswich, and so whether they're bigger or smaller than you or whatever, I mean, you still if someone can make $65,000 as an officer in Beverly, and they can make 51 in Wenham or whatever, like that's going to we can't just pay less because we're smaller. We do still have to compete in the same labor market in an area that is getting tougher and tougher to staff.
So I think part of the analysis, Jeff, is some percentage of this was competitive catch up, at least if I can speak in the hands of the negotiators, and some percentage was wage inflation, right? Because if I were a taxpayer and I see whatever, a 6% increase across the board or something, my question might be, okay, maybe inflation last year was that, is that sort of the go forward rate? Or was some, is some portion of that a catch up to our peer group, that we've been lagging in some of these, jobs that you could go across communities to get. And some of it was related to, from the union perspective, of just the COLA sort of inflation impact,
I mean, I think you hit it. I think it's both of those. I think there was a catch-up provision there. I think there was a perception that, maybe our salaries had lagged relative to what they should have been. And then
Yeah.
there was the COLA part of it as well. You actually weren't there last night, David, but Eric uttered a phrase last night that kind of made me, kind of took me back a little bit. But he mentioned as part of negotiations, perceived lost wages as part of the, is what, the Mass Teachers Association is sort of looking at when they're entering negotiations. So they're basically, looking at contracts and saying, we perceive that we weren't paid enough during the last couple COVID years. So there has to be restitution for that, restitution for that. And then
Wow.
we'll begin to talk about,
Yeah.
moving forward, which, I mean,
That's a tough thing.
And it's hard, and again, like if I go to my own negotiation, I don't certainly have that kind of clout, and probably our DPW doesn't have that kind of clout, but the MTA might, the police might, but yeah, the idea that we owe someone a 5% increase over this year, but by the way, you should have paid me 5% more last year. That's as a taxpayer, yeah, that's a little hard to, swallow, because, you probably feel like, well, I didn't, I didn't get a, properly quality compensated in those last 2 years either.
Right.
And where's
I
mine?
think the real conundrum will be, if property values don't keep going up with inflation and our town's costs do, then we're going to be in a world of hurt, right?
And then they can't, right? Because
Right.
property values are a function of taxes, and taxes are going up higher than inflation. So values aren't going to go up to be commensurate. And eventually, I don't know when that tipping point hits, but it's going to hit.
Right. Because I think the variable side is so tight, right? You'll just have to dig into existing services. There's just not enough, right?
That's what we're hearing, the school boards and the communities that are have struck or maybe currently are striking are saying. Newton, I heard that on television the other night. If you get the wage increases that you are requesting, it will result in this many, whatever the figure was, 50, 60 positions being cut in the next cycle. That's the reality. The increases doesn't push the availability, it doesn't push income up to pay it. It's going to come from cutting. So that seems to be what some of these communities are having to start to talk about.
Yep.
So
Let's keep moving.
I'm sorry, Finn.
Oh, I was just saying, let's keep moving through the agenda.
Yeah,
let's keep moving through the agenda.
Good discussion for the go forward. Where we're at, of course, is that these are in effect done and negotiate contracts. So yeah, why don't we try to press forward? I didn't want to cut you off, and you wanted to
No,
talk.
I have a document that I am trying to keep track of topics that I would like us to be able to communicate effectively to the citizens at the town meeting, not just about this budget and our opinions on it, and where it's where the changes are coming from, but also the things that we feel as a finance committee that the citizens need to be aware of and pay the most attention to over the next couple of years as we look to be loading on more and more cost, the way things are rolling up with the school and all the other things we're talking about here. So maybe when we get to the end of the agenda, I'll just keep adding to it during our conversation and see what you guys think of this list.
Yes, thank you. I think it adds to the transparency that we're talking about. So focusing maybe first on the operating budgets. You all tell me uh, if I've missed hearing objections that we wish to raise, or if we are generally in agreement, and there is a consensus of approval for the operating budget requests for all of the town's departments. We have reviewed them. We can maybe ask Jeff to pull that slide up again quickly and looks through it. I think we understand where the large increases are coming from in terms of, if not dollars, in percentages, due to some increases in additional hours in the planning land use area, going from 3 to 5 for the select board. What else? Higher cost of labor in the town's clerk office because of the number of elections this year. The contractual obligations, adding 2% COLA, 3% increases, the step increases that we discussed within the police department, also part of their contracts, and otherwise, well, stipend in the cemetery, where somebody from the DPW, the administrative assistant, the DPW is providing that assistance. It sounded like really at her own expense, and not being compensated, so should be compensated for that time now. That seems to be describing the outliers. Everything else seems to be pretty much in line with all of the explanations that we've had with in terms of those labor contracts. If I'm misstating, let me know. If there are areas that we wish to raise at this point in terms of the operating budgets, I think this is a good time to bring those up, because this is our kind of our last shot before next week. We're going to vote for our recommendation for or not that will go into the warrant book. Hearing none, it sounds to me as though we are 5-0 in favor of approval and recommendation of the warrant article, which will include the operating expenditures. I'll narrow that to specifically town government, and then I guess open the question about schools. Obviously, we don't go schools as an up or down. We don't get the same level of review as we do with the town departments, department by department. So I'll open the question, or open the discussion then about schools. Are there any specific areas that we wish to push back on within the schools' proposed budget that we heard and discussed last night had the presentation of last night at the quintuple boards meeting?
So I will give you the reaction my wife had to me when I said, all right, we're going to be sitting in front and talking about the town's budget. And she said, in the past, the thing that irritated her the most about that presentation was the FinCom's kind of unwillingness to take responsibility for the education, for oversight of the education budget. Meaning, it is what it is. there's nothing we could do about it. So I'm trying to keep my wife happy um, by 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 looking at this and listening to what that what the presentation was, and but I'm struggling to find anything that I feel confident enough to push back on. And it feels like so many other things. There's contractual labor and out of our control, and even the the reimbursement we get for out of towns students being way below our cost, but completely out of our control as well, because it's kind of dictated by the state and those laws. It just feels like a budget that we are, like you said, handed and told that this is what it's going to be.
Yeah, somewhat. What the difference, as I see it, is we are making a judgment in its totality with respect to the schools. So in that respect, clearly it's different because within the town, we have the opportunity to look at each department. And we look at the spending of each department. With respect to the schools, it is the school systems spending more generally that we are able to review and are opining on.
Well, there's also the aspect as well that the schools committee spends a lot of time working with the school district on the budget, as opposed to every other department in town is overseen by us essentially, versus having a dedicated committee for it.
That's a great point.
So it's not necessarily, I think I agree that it is handed to us, but at the same time, the other argument can be made that it has more civil oversight because it has a dedicated committee. It's just not us.
Yeah, yeah. But not to
And all
dismiss
of
your
those
wife's
are public
comment.
online.
Yeah, good point. Not to dismiss your wife's comment, because perception is, it's cliche, but perception are people's realities. So maybe it can be described and presented by us differently than it has in the past, so as to not give that impression. Because we have the ability, with respect to all of this spending, to individually recommend its approval or not. So nobody's being dragged, along here. Each of us gets that vote, but to Scott's point, we, as I was saying earlier, we just don't get the same level of involvement, as granular. So not hearing any, doesn't sound like any objection. So it sounds like we are together. Again, this is all provisionary. Well, actually vote next week for the record. But at this point in time, it doesn't sound like there's anything, any objections with which to return to any of the town's departments or the school committee or the regional school district regarding as far as the operating budgets are concerned.
I agree with that, Jeff. This is Finn.
Right. All right. Thank you all. Why don't we shift our focus then to capital?
Can you see the capital? Is that what's up there?
Yes.
I'll just jump in first and say it feels like we have more discretion related to capital. I know it's ultimately the select board's decision, and I just had two things I wanted to ask about, or one I wanted to ask about, one I wanted to share my opinion on. But the budgeting software, I know we talked about this in depth, Jeff Soulard, so I don't want to revisit the whole conversation, but I just want to clarify. This is the budgeting software that's primarily outward facing, enabling our taxpayers to go on a website and drill down and understand better what's going on with the budget. It's less about an internal system for doing the budgeting work itself.
Exactly. It's not my accounting software. It will, import accounting software data to, start the budgeting process, but it is not our day-to-day accounting software itself.
Okay, so then this segue to just my own conundrum. I struggle, Finn, and I don't know how to approach it. Like you say, Jeff, you say we have authority to vote down stuff and ultimately, express our opinion positively or negatively on various pieces of the budget. I'm just being transparent. Part of me says most of this stuff is not significant. It's not going to move the needle. It's not going to solve our overall problems.
Mhm.
So I don't even want to get wrapped around the axle about it with people or with departments. And I don't know enough to really get into the weeds too much with the department. I got to trust that they know what they're doing. They're not being profligate. And for the most part, what they're asking for seems reasonable. The counter to that is if I really cared about the taxes and I really wanted to try to force change, like maybe we should all be just firebrand, slash and burn, nobody spend an extra dollar on anything, and try to get a message across like it's not okay to spend the money we're spending in aggregate, and we can make that point on the little things. So there's my like philosophical conundrum. But to the extent I could have an input, I would not buy the budgeting software and I would not buy the weapons. I think they're totally not a good use of funds given the financial constraints of the town and everything else and tax rates and whatever. So I'd vote against those two.
To be fair, I mean, we looked at the same budgeting software in Essex. Would have been nice to have. I didn't put it forth in Essex. It just didn't fit. Their financial situation is probably not even as good as Wenham. So I didn't put it forward. I think it can be a helpful tool for residents. It makes my job in budget season slightly easier because you have kind of a canned package that you update it and it's live and it's posted and everybody can see it. But I can get through budget season without it. It's certainly not, it's not essential to me personally for my job. I think there's a group of folks who feel like it's essential to providing a better message to the town, but I can 100% see your point of, I think not spending $25,000 sends a good message to the town too. So I wouldn't, if we don't get it, it's certainly not the end of the world for me. I mean, it's a nice to have. I think the residents would benefit from it, but I can certainly see the approach that 25,000 in our pocket is better than not.
And then thanks. Yeah. And then on the firearms, I mean, I'm not a police officer, but firearms are built to last forever. And it's a function of the number of rounds you put through them. And I did some quick math after our last meeting. Like, I don't know how many rounds the officers are firing on an annual basis, but if it's 1,000 rounds, that's a lot. 500 maybe is required, 500 to 1,000. That'd be the only thing I'd maybe get data on, but supposedly Glocks will last for 10,000 rounds. And so these are 10 years old. They got to last for 20, 30 years. And the payback period on the savings from the ammunition is no thoughtful investor of time or money would take that payback period.
I had a similar question because I may have missed the meeting, but it sounds like we don't really discharge our weapons a lot, but I know that
Never.
right.
Yeah, it's
So
just about
really,
weapons
they're
It's just the
training.
minimum training required.
I know
You
they
got
have
to
to
fire a
do
certain number of rounds per year.
right. They have to do the training at the range or whatever, but I agree. I sort of struggle with that one. in terms of the dollars, because look, if we push the outer markers on labor costs and escalations and we've raised people's taxes, I some of these things I think are, some of them are probably considered critical essential. So maybe the communication systems, if those aren't working properly, that could cost a life or cause a problem in a response time, and maybe those things. But I sort of tend to agree, which is we've got to be careful if it doesn't really benefit the resident, and it really, and a department's getting 75% of their asks and a salary, material salary sort of escalation or budget increase, then I think we should be judicious with what the remaining money is.
Yeah, sorry, last two things. The tracking software, I didn't hear about it, but I didn't know, or I wasn't in the meeting or didn't pay attention, whatever. But so if there's a strong case for that, but I've worked with heavy construction companies and, 500 pieces of equipment and people stealing gas and people doing various things with their vehicles that are inappropriate. And like, you have to track those. I just
agree,
can't
yeah.
imagine that there's a
That
major loss
actually,
happening
yeah,
because we're
that's
not tracking that.
That probably pays itself off, right?
That would
If
have
they
to be
don't-
10,000 gallons of. That would have to be 10,000 gallons of misappropriated fuel, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Because-
it seems like it for our small fleet. And hopefully we have trustworthy people. I don't know.
I
that
think
was
we were
specifically
also, we were also
mentioned.
allocating for Hamilton. I don't know if that's going to sunset, but I don't know if that was a driver too.
Yeah, I believe they're up and running now. Their fuel dump is back up and running. But yeah, we were servicing them for a while.
It was mentioned that theft of fuel was an issue, that then there was no way to track where it was going to, and this will allow for very detailed tracking of who's using it by department and individual. So it was described by the DPW as something that is really helpful and would be
It's super helpful, but
fill a gap. Unfortunately, yeah, it's
Yeah,
unfortunate to hear that theft of gasoline is something that we have to spend money to rein in.
The only other case I might make for that as well is that Wenham is a green community, which is a special designation. The town agrees to be a green community and recognized by the state. And the reporting that goes along with the green communities gets more and more involved every year, and they are getting down more and more to the reporting at vehicle level, like how much gas and diesel and all these different things you're using. And I know Essex was a green community. We just stopped being one, actually. But it was becoming more and more of a part of my job as accountant, was sort of trying to track through gas receipt. We didn't have a fuel dump, so we were actually buying fuel at vendors. But it was becoming more and more onerous to track the various ways they wanted us to track fuel use. So I would imagine it would help with that part of it as well.
Just a question: the budgeting software, that's ClearGov,
Yes.
the vendor.
I mean, there's another one that I think
That's the
they've looked at,
product.
but ClearGov was kind of the leader in the clubhouse.
last one I was going to say is a town migration website, town website migration and setup. It's not a great website, but do we need to spend $35,000 on it right now? I don't know. If you ask any taxpayer, would they be willing to pay more taxes in order to have these things? None of them would say yes.
To
Yeah,
a
I
website.
bet not a single taxpayer would say yes to those 4 things.
Yeah, and frankly, even taxpayers who probably complain about the website would say that, still say they wouldn't pay for it.
Totally.
I actually think that our website sucks, but we also utilize it poorly. Like, I think we could utilize our existing website much better as opposed to setting up a new website and paying for migration. Like, I very much agree on that. I'm actually in agreement with everything Dano said. I'll just support all of it so far.
Yeah, I
I'm
don't know.
done.
The website migration really hasn't been sold to me. I may have missed that the presentation.
Yeah, I mean,
that
I
would have
think
been
that
part
could,
of the general government discussion. I don't know to what extent you feel comfortable talking about that, Jeff.
yeah, I mean, I can't, I mean, I think it bubbles up from, you know, a lot of, you know, sort of folks reaching out to the select board, you know, complaining about, and I think, you know, maybe to Scott's point, some of it is more, you know, are we fully utilizing it the best way? But folks are unhappy with, you know, all kinds of things about the website doesn't do this and it doesn't do that. And, you know, so they're sort of pressured to make a move to do something to make the website better. This is the solution they've come up with. You know, to Dano's point, you know, you know, those same people, if you said, well, are you willing to, I mean, I don't know what the impact of $35,000 is to the average person, but, you know, would you spend $7 a year to improve the website? And most people would probably say, well, no, you know, no, I wouldn't. So, I mean, I think like all of these things you're talking about here are, you know, I always used to look at things, I would, you know, call it the wants and the needs buckets. And, you know, all the ones you're questioning, they fall into the, you know, into the want budget. You know, we have a website, you know, could it be better? Yes. But is it worth investing in a new one? You know, I don't know if it is or not, you know, honestly. You know, budgeting software, yeah, it would be nice to have. I think it would, you know, provide what residents with more, you know, some info in an easier way to digest or in more real and in more in real time. But is it worth $25,000 to the average resident? Is it more of a nice to have than a need to have? I would say probably, you know, the weapons probably the same thing. Um, Trying to think of what yeah, I mean the only one, so the fueling software is the only one I would probably say I see a little bit more as a need than a want, but the rest of them I would agree. And you know, it falls within your, you know, charge to be the folks to say that, you know, we don't disagree that these are things we could use, but we don't feel like they're things we need. You know, and I think, you know, sometimes, you know, you know, I think we said perception is reality at some point tonight. Like, you know, at some point, you know, you have to show that, you know, look, we don't just say yes to everything that comes down the pike. You know, we do look at things thoughtfully and weigh the pros and the cons and whether we need it or not, and look at the current environment for taxes being paid and the state of the economy. And, you know, if you go through this and you were to not do all of these, you know, you're whittling off $100,000+ probably.
And I suppose I'd I'd walk back the tracking software piece if I think about, you know, the alternative is you gotta log stuff manually, paper every time you drive, mileage in and out, and add up and account for it. You add up the manpower involved in all that. Does that end up costing us more of hourly wages than it would for the tracking software? Maybe, I don't know. I don't know how much. I mean, I've done that with vehicles before that I didn't own and I had to track my mileage, and it's a pain in the butt. You got a logbook, you fill out the stuff every time you're in and out, and you got to be better with security and make sure people aren't stealing the gas, but there's ways to do that. So anyway, I don't know what the right answer is on the tracking software. 25,000 seems like a lot, but would it save $25,000 worth of labor at what, $50 an hour on average is however much that is, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I think, you know, Finn mentioned earlier, you know, $25,000 is, you know, you'd need like, you know, 10,000 gallons of gas or whatever to, you know, to say, you know, to have $25,000 with the theft. You know, so I don't know how you'd look at that in sort of a payback period, but, you know, I think you're right. There are other sort of things that, you know, it makes other tracking things easier. I think it would allow Rich to manage the fleet a little bit. You know, I know in Essex, you know, there would, you know, you'd kind of hear, you know, I feel like these, you know, they're driving the trucks around too much and, you know, maybe they should do less driving and, you know, do more of other stuff or whatever. And, you know, I think this indirectly helps you manage, you know, how the vehicles are being used a little bit and how much they're being driven. So I think there's some, you know, kind of other side benefits to this beyond just the fuel, you know, potential fuel loss. But yeah, again, it is a, you know, I mean, can you exist without it? You know, is there sort of a significant level of, you know, theft that you can live with that's, you know, a better solution than $25,000? Yeah, maybe there is.
My understanding is that the gas pumps, they're not supervised. So you don't know who's showing up and what they're showing up with currently, unless you happen to, I don't know.
So I could just go over there in the middle of the night and pump as much gas as I want.
Well, I know you have,
No.
a certain number of people have access, but you don't know who has accessed it, I think is my impression.
Feels like a management issue, less of a technology issue. And accountability and some
How many-
structures.
How many town vehicles are there? There's probably 50. You include the police and the fire and
Yeah, I mean, honestly, yeah, I mean, police, fire says, so 5, 6. Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, I'm sure we have something kicking around with all the numbers, but yeah, I would say certainly, in the 40 range at least.
lawnmowers and all that.
Yeah. Well, exactly, because you're filling up 5-gallon, containers to, fill things, handheld things and whatever as well. So I guess the only other point of context I would throw at the DPW tracking software would be, if you look at the DPW and you look at Rich and his approach to capital, he's someone who does seem to take it pretty seriously. He defers where he can defer. He, bought smaller equipment where he could buy smaller equipment. He's, trying to consolidate, pieces of equipment into single pieces of equipment. So, I tend to look at that a little bit too, is that, if someone like him is asking for the fuel tracking software, I might look at it different than someone else, asking for something that I might perceive a little bit as a want. I might look at it a little differently from him than I would look at it from somebody else.
I'd echo that. He seems like he's really serious about economics and management in general.
Yeah. Which is it's a valuable thing to have.
I'm looking at the list that we've come up with where we might push back on the firearms, the budgeting software, the website, and possibly push back on the tracking. That looks like about $120,000, something like that.
I got it at 107, 25 for the fuel, 35 for the website, 25 for the budget, and 22 for the firearms. Was there another one? So yeah, that's 107. But yeah, I mean, that's not insignificant.
Scott, David,
Yeah.
thoughts on capital spend, these specific items we're thinking about looking to push back on and see where
Yeah, I'm supportive.
wants to be.
Yep. I'm supportive of those items. The
Sounds like
firearms.
fuel tracking is on the bubble.
Yeah, I mean, if I put it in order of things, I wanted to talk about the firearm replacement anyway, just because the payback period didn't make sense to me, especially given what sounded like our fairly recent or within the past 10 years purchase of the previous firearms. And budgeting software and migration, I'm in agreement on. The one thing I do recall when we were having a discussion on the fuel tracking software is Rich did imply that there were some things going on that he was not at liberty to, or it seemed like wasn't at liberty to talk about. That may be of a larger issue. I don't know what that means. And also that other towns did sometimes use our refueling. So my initial thought too is that $25,000 of the tracking software seems expensive, and I think if it's something that we didn't pay for, I think we could survive without it. But I would echo the comments that Rich seems to be very on top of a lot of these things, and so I feel like he wouldn't be making the request unless he felt he really did need it.
Well, so Scott, that just makes me think that, I mean, I referenced it's a management problem, but it makes you wonder if there aren't some like hard conversations to be had and some people to potentially be disciplined and or people
Well,
to
right, and I don't
feel
want
like
to
they're
put
being
any words in his mouth or anything, right? Because I have no. It's just when I do recall when we were talking about it, it sounded like there may have been some other things going on, and I don't know if it was a new thing because he related to that it's been a problem for a while, whatever.
well, that's kind of what I guess where I was going is a software solution might solve the problem, but so might having some more structure and discipline and some hard conversations with people and calling them out. And maybe it's politically easier to have the software, but maybe we're just enabling bad behavior that I don't know. I mean, we're
Yeah, and we're
reading into a
speculating,
lot, it
right?
sounds
Yeah,
like, but it'd be good to
yeah.
get some more detail.
Those, for all we know, those conversations have taken place, and this is the resulting solution.
True, true.
My sense
So I'm
of those
ranking at the
comments
moment,
historical.
I'm sorry.
My sense when he made those comments Scott's referring to was they were a little bit more historical than maybe current was when was my take of it, but that could be wrong.
So right now I'm sort of ranking these. I have weapons as probably the most objectionable of the four that are on discussion, and then the budget software second, website migration third, and fuel tracking four, and yeah, kind of on the bubble. Does that fairly represent in
I mean,
order?
I'd probably think of it as there's relative unanimity around the first three, and then the fourth one is TBD.
Is it worth doing a roll call vote on the tracking and just putting it to bed? And
I'm actually not, I don't know that I'm going to make the meeting next week, unfortunately, so you guys can vote on my behalf, but
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to make next week's meeting either.
can we shift it a little bit?
we could have, we could meet Tuesday, or I think I could still post a meeting for Monday tomorrow. Otherwise we could do a Thursday meeting.
I'm out of town personally from the 6th through like the 12th. So, and I'm on like the West Coast, so it's harder to get evening meetings because I'm in the middle of the workday, but that's my problem. It's probably if Finn can make another day, be better to work around Finn.
I'm trying to find my calendar here.
I could do Monday though, the 5th. We have a following meeting the 14th. So we have the 7th and we have the 14th.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so the select board is going to vote on the 6th on operating budget and capital, which is why I had us teed up to vote on the 7th. But also start a discussion, assuming that by a week from today, you'll have information, Jeff, on warrant articles that
Well,
not
they'll
related to the budget.
They're closing the budget they're closing the warrant, excuse me, next Tuesday. I'm not familiar enough with the process here to know if that would actually like translate into actual warrant articles at that point, but they would be quickly coming after that.
To the extent possible, we were to have discussed any of the warrant articles that we've been made aware of that involve the expenditure or transfer of money other than the capital budget and the
Well, yeah, these time
operating budget for an initial discussion. And then the 14th would be our final voting and reviewing on those other warrant articles.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I guess.
I'm all in favor of pushing this, because I want obviously I want all your input, rather than, and somebody abstained on these critical votes. But we are sort of running up against some deadlines here.
So I'm looking at my calendar. I'm free entirely on Monday, and on Tuesday I'm free until 7 o'clock. And then Thursday I'm available at like 8:30 and on, and I'm available on Friday.
Yeah, I could do later. I could do 8:30 on any of those days.
How about the rest of the group? Where are you at on timing?
I'm just not clear what days we're talking about.
Could we just do the 7th like planned, but do it 8:30
Later.
to 9:30 and make it a 1-hour meeting?
I'd be fine doing that as long as we were diligent with our time.
Yeah.
8:30 to 9:30. Okay, I'd probably be a couple minutes late to that one, but it's Wednesday.
Or
We just-
Thursday the 8th. Can you make Thursday the 8th, Scott? Same 8:30 to 9:30?
Yeah, I could do that 8:30 to 9:30 on Thursday.
Yeah, I could do 8:30 to 9:30
I can do it.
on Thursday.
Okay, so either Wednesday or Thursday.
Sounds like
Either-
Wednesday's harder for Finn, even late.
Okay. All right, Jeff.
Just
what
a
about
bit,
you?
I have no idea. There's no rules against us having a meeting that starts at a given hour, right? Like we're not violating any
No.
town
I can
meeting
double
rules.
check on
Yeah,
that. I don't think so. I mean, we could have a meeting start at 6:30, and I mean, I've had meetings start at 6:30 that went to, 11:30. So,
Oh, yeah, I don't have a problem with going later. I was just
Yeah.
wondering if there are any rules on
but
starting.
yeah, I'll ask like
later.
if there's something different about starting it at 8:30. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
But
I can ask
either work for
about
me.
it. Haven't heard
Yeah.
of that. Okay, so we are tentatively then rescheduling the meeting, which was originally proposed for February 7th at 6:30, moving it to February 8th starting at 8:30.
Okay.
And then
Yeah,
obviously I'll
I'll
send
check
out
with
the
the
agenda and put it on the website. Okay.
Yeah, and where our meetings are recorded and things, I would think that could mitigate any like later start if someone were to say they couldn't go or whatever. I mean, it's like, it's still viewable in the Zoom format. So
I will, it sounds like so we're we have a majority, certainly, if not unanimous opinion that those three items we're going to I will communicate back, or Jeff will as well, back to town administrator, because this is his list of approved capital spend, which is moving toward approval by select board, that we are pushing back 4 items, 3 we're in agreement on. And then we'll see if there's adjustment made to the list. If there is, great. If there isn't, then it comes down to a recommendation vote, not by line item, but in its entirety to recommend approval or not. Just as with the operating budget, which includes both the town and the school, we're not making recommendations individually. It is on that what would be a single warrant article for combined town operating and school is what we'll be voting on.
Is there a
Maybe,
way to get
Jeff,
just a
just
simple email response from Rich? I mean, probably the simplest way I would ask the question is, hey, Rich, what's your best estimate of the real financial cost of not doing the software?
Including, extra labor charges, theft, whatever.
Stolen fuel, whatever. Yeah. And
I'd also ask him if this cost is like, is this really the vendor cost? Is there only one vendor? Was this sort of a swag, or this is pretty much the cost?
yeah, and the not doing the software doesn't mean we don't do anything. It's implementing other ways to manage the problems other than software, which I'm sure he's been doing already to the best of his ability. Anyway, if we could get some feedback from him,
Yeah,
that'd be
I'll
helpful.
email him. I'll email him first thing tomorrow.
Can we turn the page on the budget request? And I think while we're talking about this, just to cover our bases, are there any items here? We have, in theory here, found some savings. Are there any other requests that had been made which didn't make it onto the town administrator's recommended list for spend in FY25 that we might like to see and advance as uses of some of the money that we are proposing not be spent in other areas, or just leave it as proposed net savings of whatever those total to. And if I was to toss out one, maybe it is the additional work in the Council on Aging.
And Jeff,
I would love.
Some of these other ones are, like the two vehicles and equipment, Rich himself, has said that even though these were in the schedule potentially for this year, the DPW is not interested in pursuing either of those. The heating system in the fire station, our facilities people have said, based on all the work that was done on those, those are not something we need to address this year. The lead paint issue is something that everybody seems to be in agreement needs more research or whatever. The women's room in the police station, I think, is another one that they're all kind of in agreement. Pretty much everything other than the COA, the departments themselves were sort of pulled out of the mix.
Okay, good. And David, maybe you have a little bit of insight as the liaison about whether that is still something that is of interest to Jim Reynolds, or if it's really.
I think we were going to keep the rug in, right, which is sort of the go forward. And then we're going to pull the basement stuff. I mean, I think there's a broader opportunity with that building. But 12 grand's not going to do it. So I would, if we want to sort of go with a maintenance year, but I think there's a broader opportunity to do something for our seniors with that space. We own the building. We have a space on the top floor and space on the bottom floor that at one point back 34 years ago or whatever was functional. But Jim's one of those guys who's gonna go along with anything. He'd go along if we gave him nothing. I don't think it's the right decision for the town. We should replace the rug at least on the first floor. Because I think the seniors are important to this town. I think they have the challenge of not being income earning or being on fixed income and having the taxes move the other way. So I think we should, we can, we are in a tight year. I think there's a broader opportunity to maybe even raise some volunteer funds and some volunteer tradesmen's time to do something there. I just saw an opportunity to use an asset we own. And that's a constituent that has its challenges with our town, among others, right? People that aren't using the school system, people that have a lock on their income. But I don't think the 12,000 was a game changer. I think there's a bigger opportunity than that anyway. So I'm supportive of deferring it.
Is this the time though to try to pitch that, David?
I wanted to, Dano. I think when I looked at it and I walked it, and I know the building because I did Cub Scouts in it like 40, 50 odd years ago or whatever. And I saw that they had on the third floor that I guess it used to be a storage area for Little League. And there was a sort of unfinished top floor, which is probably harder for seniors to get unless you put an elevator on the back side of it at some point. But as you go down a floor, it's the full footprint of the floor that they use now below. It has a sort of outdated commercial kitchen, which would need to be, redone or whatever. But I looked at it as space that they could do for speakers to come in, to have more proper gatherings, and even to, maybe lease out that space when we don't need it to other organizations who could do $100 donation or whatever. I think there's a broader opportunity. I just think we're farther in the budget period, probably than, I see it as sort of knowing my way a little bit around construction. I see it as like $100,000-$250,000, maybe less if you use volunteer. It's not a $20,000 play because there's sheetrocking and flooring and like rehab to do to make it functional. But I think if I were to look at an opportunity in the future to use our free cash and maybe get some tradespeople to volunteer their time and do a few fundraisers, I see it as a huge opportunity to take a space that we're using 1/3 of the physical space of, and there's a pretty good pickup at that place in terms of they did an outdoor bocce, sort of field or area, and it got really utilized. So there's people that really do come there. So
I'm just afraid if we delay a year, who knows where you'll be, who knows what life will be and what people's perspectives will be. And if we're taking advantage, I love your whole theory about find some wins for the town in the midst of what's always a difficult story. And that's part of why I'm so anti the firearms. Like, I'm a big fan of the Second Amendment and all that stuff, but the optics of that is just horrible. So whether independent of the economics, but could we, long story short, could we throw like 50 grand at it now?
I would,
and throw some out to the town and say, hey, volunteers, and maybe by next year we get 100 grand.
And maybe we could get a matching grant with it. Just because we earmark it doesn't mean we would spend it on something frivolous. We go through a plan and we go through a process, and I'm happy to spearhead it. But it feels like when I looked at our capital spend, I said, okay, this is all internally focused, which I get. You gotta provide the town services. But if I'm a resident and I see whatever 850,000 of spend, none of it, this was an opportunity I saw, but as I saw things sort of got shaved and different things, I think, you could probably do something with 50. You could do something for sure.
Or a first phase, or like a prep for a future phase or something.
You could start to do, you just would want to make sure whatever you do with the first beachhead that you complete something, right? You don't end up with like half a project, right? Or maybe we can match it with a grant, maybe the Council on Aging, or maybe Hamilton would contribute a few dollars too, but you don't want to get into sort of shared resources with getting the sort of those kind of matches.
Well,
but
we just allocate it, like you said, earmark it, and at least it's out there next year when things come around and there's already 50 earmarked, and we could throw another 50 at it.
Yeah, I really saw it as an opportunity for a building we already own. And Jim is the type of guy, he's a really responsible manager. He won't ask for a cent. And I brought it up with him, and he's like, oh yeah, it's going to be hard to get money. He was almost like running it down. Like he was like more of the mindset, like, I don't want to ask for anything. I might get my electric bill cut off or something. But he's so used to having no allocation, I think, besides his just operating budget, But if you could make that a good destination, even if someone, someone wanted to hold a business meeting at 8 o'clock at night down in the bottom and it has a nice area or some, for, FinCom can meet there. I don't know. But I saw it as like, wow, this is like a lot of space. When I looked in, if you go down, and we should go for a tour there, if you go see the basement of that place, it's filled up with old wheelchairs and old tiles. It's just, you kind of look at it and go, geez, this is like a town asset. It's got to be 400 or 500 square feet on the bottom, maybe
So
more.
David and Dano, to figure out a way to push this forward, because right now we'd be saying, look, let's earmark some money to do something with the council on aging. It may not be enough information to kind of justify arguing for the citizens to do it. Like, how would you pitch that in a way that would people say we're going to give them a blank check to do $50,000 of anything?
Yeah, if
Yeah,
I can jump in, after hearing your enthusiasm about the facility, Dave, I stopped in actually a couple of weeks ago.
Good.
It might be near 3 weeks ago now, and got a similar tour through the facility and got to talk with Jim a bit. And it sounded from my take on that, uh, accessibility is top of mind. So anything that's done in the basement,
Mhm.
I think uh, excludes a certain population of the people that go there. So that was top of mind for him. Uh, no access down the stairs or to the attic. So that's a challenge. Yeah, and I think there may be discussions ongoing with, and maybe it's been tabled for this year with the CPC. Yeah, I think there is a broader plan or possible plan for the building, and as part of that community preservation funding that maybe more in line with creating the greater usability of the space and that you're thinking about. The basement floor, I asked him specifically about it. Yeah, because people can't get there. Yeah, you're right.
I,
He's not one to
in,
ask for money.
in
Uh,
fairness, Jeff, I felt like he sort of works against himself. I think he's excellent at executing the day to day, and I think he's the right guy for the job, and I like him a lot, and I think he's a very responsible manager. But there's people who sort of see things of what they've got to do in front of them, and then there's people who see opportunity to make something bigger than it is, and that's probably not Jim. He's not gonna, what I saw in that space, I said, all you do is put an elevator on you've got a whole nother contiguous lot that abuts that corner. So when you look off the back of that building to the right, you've got buildable land. So you put an elevator on the back of whatever you build out, and you've got direct access now to all 3 floors.
yeah,
And
right.
frankly, you should have
I've
that.
never seen an elevator cost less than $250,000.
You can do it for like
Annual
100.
maintenance is brutal.
You can do
I
it for
mean,
like
I just
100.
got. I mean, I'm all in favor of what we're talking about, but at this point, we're making a lot of assumptions on assumptions for something that's a week away. I just think
Well, that's why I
it.
let it go, Scott, because I
yeah,
Yeah,
I
saw.
I know, I
brought
know.
it
I'm
back.
just saying
I
that
brought it
it's.
back up. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's fine
yeah,
with me.
I'm with you. Let's
Okay.
keep going.
Good discussion, but yeah, we're kind of late stage here. But just thought I'd toss that out if we wanted to signal the flooring as a give back to COA, but
I think it was
doesn't.
just the replacement carpet at this point. I think it was like whatever, a 10,000 earmark, which I can't imagine it only cost 10,000 to put a carpet in, but we'll leave that alone.
Yeah. All right. So moving, yeah, as you said, moving along. We will, Jeff and I, maybe you and I should chat about how to communicate back to, well, it's government, in the case of the budget and the website software, that FinCom's not really in favor of that, or is not in favor of that spending. And the outreach to Rich, just to hear a
Yeah.
little more about the justification. Is there a financial justification for 25 grand on the tracking software?
Yeah, I'll get in touch with Rich tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Probably actually a phone call, and then get something sent back out to the FinCom, by mid-morning tomorrow, with a little bit more information on that.
Police on the weapons.
Yeah, I mean, we can, yeah, I can reach out to individual departments and just let them know. I'll let Steve know about budgeting and website. I'll let the police know on weapons.
I mean, I'm not trying to delegate this. Should
No, it's fine. I mean,
I be doing this?
what's that?
Should I be doing this?
No, it's fine. Because I'm going to be talking to the police tomorrow. I have a feeling anyway, so it'll just it'll come up in the course of something else, and then obviously I see Steve all the time, so I'll deal with that with him, and then yeah, Rich will just find out what we can find out and move on from there.
Okay. All right, then we've covered that well enough, unless there's any other discussion on what we will be voting on next week. We can move on to the next agenda item, which is review and vote if there's a review, edit, and votes on the meeting minutes of the 16th of December and the 3rd of January. First, with respect to the meeting minutes from December 16th, are there any comments, corrections, edits? Hearing none, if somebody would like to make a motion to approve.
Oh, this is Finn. I'll make the motion.
Have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor of accepting as written and presented the minutes of our meeting from December 16th? Jeff Calder, yes.
Dave Harnish,
yes.
yes.
Scott Schoenberger, yes.
I wasn't there, so I'll recuse or abstain.
Correct. You abstain? Yes. I'm sorry, I should have pointed that out. Only 4 of us could vote on that one. Okay, thank you. So that passes 4-0. Meeting minutes from January 3rd. Any comments or corrections, edits? By my record, all of us were present. If somebody would like to make a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion to approve.
In a second.
It's
I'll
Finn's
second the motion.
Good, thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes of January 13th as written? Jeff Calder, yes.
Finsberg, yes.
Dave
Scott
Harnish, yes.
Schoenberger, yes.
Dan Ojikonovich, yes.
Great, thank you, gentlemen. If you all can bear with me a little bit longer, Finn, maybe we can take a few minutes on your list.
All right. I'm about to get invaded by some children here, so I will go very quick. I don't know if you can give me screen sharing access, but
Yep.
if not, I'm going to email you. I just tried to log into my Wenham email address, and it told me my password is wrong. So I
Oh,
think
Finn, you
something.
got to reach out. Reach out to Joe and get the help desk. I had the same issue. They did something in town that reset a bunch of our passwords. He'll give you the information. The assistant town administrator.
Yep. Okay, I will do that. But I've put it in my personal email, and I'll email it over to you guys, just so you can take a look. It's just I'm trying to cover the topics that that I would want to know about if I was a citizen, right? And I think you should be able to see this now, right? You guys
Yeah.
go. You can watch TV on that, all right, guys? So basically, it's what is it that they can hold in their head, what that we can hold in our head, the elevator pitch of what's the big change year over year, and the next one is benchmarks, right? What do people, you know, like when they look at what they're spending this year, is it materially different from our neighbors or from our peers? How would we measure that, right? I think Dano, you were asking about cost per student last night. You know, there might be other more proper metrics than these to worry about. And then,
Yeah, certainly with respect to the schools, we've been promised, and that information will be coming.
mhm.
I think there's 5 or 6 metrics on which they're going to be measuring themselves.
Right.
That's
I'm not wedded to anything in particular for how we might kind of set these benchmarks or which ones we might select. But I would like us to figure out how to do that. And then the third bullet point for the 2025 budget is just kind of pointing out that the entire school budget is based off of kind of a labor contract that is expiring this August, and we don't, you know, the school committee has done their best to include the risks, you know, the proper costs in there, but you know, it's unknown, unlike the rest of the major labor contracts that Wenham has negotiated this year, right? That are well known and not at risk of a major change. And then the future stuff is just, it's just doom and gloom here when it comes to the cost of the town, right? With major costs coming down the pike, likely, right? And I think we're trying to figure out in prior meetings about how we might properly put these in front of the town, right? It's like, hey, you know, we would like people to be aware of this, right? And we would like your participation, right? More people involved to help us manage these. And this doesn't even feel like the full list, right? There's the water PFAS filter, financial software, trash costs, new school buildings. The fields are going to have to start getting paid for, right? Master planning process is going to be ending. You know, OPEB and other benefits are likely to continue, and you know, what is it? Our somewhere around 60 or 70% of the budget for Wenham is that's not the school is all labor, right? Much of it dictated by labor contracts, right? So if those change, you know, there's some major risk. So I don't know, I'm happy to call this a straw man or just sort of the things I'm wondering or worried about or think other people might be interested in, and let you guys tell me, you know, what your own opinions are on these or others. So
Well, I'm certainly in favor of the improved transparency, and I would keep using the word, but you know, if we're hearing about it, you know, I think we ought to do our best to think about how to package it, even if it is somewhat speculative, and translate it to best where it's possible into possible tax impact. It's something that Hamilton has done. They'll be doing it again, and sharing, as you heard last night, you know, sharing their spreadsheet on that. And it's not just the new school, and it's not just the fields. There are other capital projects that the schools will be spending money on to maintain the existing facilities, so that, you know, people are as well informed as they can be, and as, you know, we can make them without making any insurances, because it is future and it is somewhat speculative with all the caveats, so that people can't say, well, I didn't realize when I voted for X that Y was known to be, you know, coming in the next year or two. I think that's part of our responsibility in informing the public.
So I will click the button to send this over to you guys so you can noodle it on it and maybe add or subtract, or that sort of stuff. And unfortunately, as much as I really like this and I want to do this, I'm not sure that that the finance committee is the right people to do it and to know the right numbers and to do the right division. So I'm loading the town's administrator and Jeff with more work ahead of that meeting. So I don't know that that's entirely fair. But I'm just wanted to kind of be clear on that as well, is that this is, you know, asking for more transparency means more work and communication. So
Yeah, and I mean, that's fine. I mean, you know, you're right. We'll have more of the numbers and whatever. I mean, you know, I can envision pulling some stuff together and then, you know, providing the number shell, and then, you know, putting it back to the group to sort of wordsmith it or make sure it, you know, it reads out like you guys want it to read. But we'll do our best to get you all the numbers and things like that we can get you. But no, I mean, I think we're all trying to get to the same place. I mean, we want to maintain the services that Wenham provides to their residents in a way that, you know, makes the most fiscal sense for the residents themselves. And, you know, and sometimes, you know, you got to work harder to tell the story. And, you know, and sometimes like tonight, you find places where you can trim and make the story a little better. And, you know, it's an ongoing process. So I think this is all good stuff.
I'll just add, there is some homework coming for each of you in terms of helping to contribute to the warrant book. The thought that Jeff and I were discussing is looking at the liaison assignments as maybe the best to take the initial swipe at the descriptions that will go along with the information about where the increases are within the budget. So that's to come. It's part of putting together the warrant articles and the warrant book that will be distributed at annual meeting.
Yeah, and that process has started. I've started to build out, you know, sort of the narrative piece of the booklet with, you know, tables built in for, you know, as Jeff says, certain sections of the budget, which then, you know, David can speak to, you know, council on aging challenges, and Finn can speak to, you know, things in the public safety space, et cetera. But the shell would have, you know, kind of the numbers, as Finn was saying a minute ago, you know, to help you, you know, base the story, you know, on what's driving the, you know, the real numbers and the real changes in the tables. But yeah, I think the liaison way is, you know, as we talked about, Jeff, makes sense. And then you know, certainly then you know, Steve and I are available too to, you know, help you fill in the gaps if you're, you know, having trouble, you know, connecting all the dots or whatever, as you try to tell that story.
Very good. It's
Good.
8:22. So if there's no further comments or areas of discussion for this evening, somebody like to make a motion, we will adjourn our meeting.
I'll make a motion to adjourn our meeting.
I second it.
All in favor of adjourning the meeting of the Wenham Finance Committee, January 31st at 8:23 p.m. In favor, Jeff Calder, yes.
Dave Harnish, yes.
Finn Sprague,
Jack
yes.
Schoenberger, yes.
Deanna Jakanovich, yes.
We are adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen.